In this module, we'll be starting with the module for the word building series. So this series will be built of few chapters to make sure we cover entire module on just the word building before we dive into car animation. For this one, we'll be using a very powerful PCG framework that came with Unreal 5.2, and we are going to use a 5.4 for this one. So in this case, the whole point of using PCG is to create the entire dynamic force environment that will perfectly integrate into our racetrack, which we're going to cover that in the other chapters, and also will allow for effective and also scalable terrain generation within this world building series. And this approach will also help not only enhance the visual richness of your scene, but also streamline your workflow within that pipeline. But it also will make it sure that we're gonna have an easier time to create a larger and more detailed words. So in this case, what we're gonna do, I'm going to first present the whole outline of the project. So currently, the project that comes with it for this entire course will have models included that also goes for all the parts that we're going to use it to, not only to build entire racetrack, that will come with the other parts that we're going to use also for within the PCG framework, but at the same time we are going to include things like European Beach that comes actually for free as part of Unreal Epic's Quixel Forest package, which you can find in the marketplace. And you can find the link in the project scope of the series. And at the same time, I also will be using some of this asset that comes with other package, which also comes for free. But to begin with, I would like to also explain the things that you need to watch out for while you are creating the environment using PCG framework. But because this project already has enabled PCG framework, but I want to show you how to open it. So if you go to Edit and under Plugins, you'll go and type down PCG, and what you'll see, the PCG we currently be using is a procedural content generation framework. So that's the one we're gonna be focusing on. So if you go into Plugins under Edit window and then you go enable it, it will ask you to restart, and then you have to restart the project. To begin with, let's go and start it, and then let's create our first PCG. So when you go to your PCG folder, go down to PCG graph and create it, click on it. Let's call it PCG Forest. Let's start adding some of the nodes. So in this case, what we're gonna do is first we need to enable some of the settings, which comes with the node here. So what I need to do, I need to enable one of the inputs, and let me call this landscape. Next thing we need to do is to also make sure that the landscape communicates with the rest of the node structure which we're about to build. Because if you look it up, the entire surface comes as a landscape data. So we also need to make sure inside the PCG graph, we have to not only define, but also declare that we are going to deal with the surface that reads as a landscape data. So to begin with, first we need to do is to name this as landscape, but also change this to surface. And if you open this up, then you see that our node has changed to kind of green color, and we can use this now to work with landscape. Next thing I want to do is to add few nodes. So in this case, I'm gonna first add spline sampler. And we are going to use not only one, but we're going to use 3 spline samplers for 3 different foliages. One will be for grass, one will be for trees, and the other one for the rocks. So to begin with, let's just duplicate them. And the next thing what we're actually going to do, because this specific PCG will be working with spline, which means we are going to deal with spline component, which we will then create it later inside actual blueprint. So in this case, what I'm going to do is to first define what I'm actually working with. I'm going to add a projection node. And also I'm going to add a get actor data. As you notice what I've just done, I have introduced some of the nodes that not only deals with the entire landscape actor, but at the same time, it also will allow us to project anything that will relate to PCG graph here onto this case landscape actor, and also we'll be able to, using the actor blueprint, which we're going to create later, it will basically use this to define anything that will be created into a landscape. So the first thing first, let me just connect this to input here. And I'm also going to use the landscape input to project it with the target. Next thing I want to do is to connect our output into a spline. And I'm going to do it individually. Let me just move this out of the way. And also what I'm going to do is to start adding transform points. What transform points do is, first things first, we are using spline. And what does spline do is picks up the information that comes from get actor data, maps into projects, in this case into landscape, but at the same time we are using our actor as a spline component actor. In this case we're gonna have actor with spline with the spline component inside it. It will basically fit into a spline sampler. But also we need to be sure what we are dealing with. So because at the moment it will only work on spline, but we want to make sure it works inside the spline, which means after we close our spline, it will generate all the foliage that we want to have as our environment. So make sure you select all of the spline samplers, set this on the interior, and also make sure you set it to unbound, because if you don't, then all your meshes will never appear. So next thing I want to do next is to set the transform. So just to come back to our transform nodes here defines the positions and what types of transform you want to define, and also change it in terms of, like, for example, a translation, a rotation, and scales of each point. It will feed through the spline sampler into the positions that we are going to generate. So in this case, I'm just going to plug it like this. And let me just do that one by one here. And let's for now use other node, which is called static mesh spawner. And what static mesh spawner do is spawns our meshes. So in this case, I'm gonna, for this one, because this is gonna be our grass, so I'm gonna select all of this on top, and I move this out of the way, and I'm going to press C for comment, and now let me call it grass. I change the color as well, so it looks much more prettier. And I am going then, when you click on select your static mesh spawner, you need to create entries here. So let's click on this, and then on the descriptor, I'm going to look for the grass. Let's just check it out if there's a grass that we want to. Yes, that's the one. So if you go look it up, the project already includes this grass, so don't you worry about this. You can use that one. So now if you go back, and then let's also, now, because we already have our first operation done for the grass, we can test it out. But before we can test it out, we need to also create our actor blueprint for that. So let's go back and let's go to content drawer. And where you have PCG, let's right click inside a folder and create a new blueprint. Set it to actor. Let's call it BP forest. Double click. And once you're here, what we need to do is to add our spline. That's the spline component I was talking about, because at the moment, our structure of our graph in this case only is using, in this case, PCG graph information, but it doesn't know where to fit in. So that's why we're gonna first create a spline, because at the moment, we are only dealing with the component, which is the spline. But also we need to also later define the component, which is the PCG. So maybe to make it life easier, let's go and add the PCG component. As if you look it up, this is the PCG we need. So the PCG forest is looking for, that's the one here. Let's add this, compile it. And of course, we haven't done it yet because we still have to draw our spline. So if you go and select your spline component and right click on this, and let's go and generate our spline. So if you look it up, there's called a function spline generation panel. Click it up and let's set our shape to circle. As you can see, at the moment, it only works at 100 units. So we can increase it to something like 2000. And now if we can just close it, as you can see now we have a spline. But also let's just remove some of the points here. So at the moment, as you can see, there's some spline points that are literally being stuck in the beginning. We can just, once it's selected, you can press delete and then we'll remove it. And there will be another spline there somewhere point, but that's fine. Let's leave it for now. And we can just go back and select our spline again, and under spline setting under your details panel on the right, we need to make sure we don't want to close it. So now what you see, it's closed, but you can see there's a funny looking tangled around spline between each point. So what we need to do is to remove one of the points. So let me just select that spline point here, click to delete. And now as you can see, we can now compile that. And let's go back to our level. And let's go to contour drawer. Also, if you wanted to keep click on contour drawer, you can also dock into a layout here, and it will basically be there all the time. So if you go back to your PCG folder and if you drag and drop into the space, now you see grass started to generate. And obviously it doesn't look too pretty because they all look the same and they follow exactly the same row and column and so on. But there's a little fix for that. And obviously it's very simple. So what we do in this case, we're going back over to forest, and that's why we have transfer point for that. We can randomize our minimum and maximum offsets, and also we can set up different rotations and at the same time different scales. So in this case, all of these figure here and each part of this transform settings are used for randomizing transformations based on X, Y, and Z values. So as you can open this up, it shows you X and Y. So let me just do it for this one. Let's set to -10 units, this one 10, and the same goes for, in this case, Y value, -10, and the same for that. And let's do this because we're only using Z, yo, in this case, rotation axis. So I'm gonna set this to minimum -90 and maximum to 90. And let's do the same for the scale, so set to 0.6, for example. So if you compile this, and now you start seeing a randomization taking its place. And also, if you wanted to make your grass a little bit closer to each other, you can go back again, and in this case, spline sampler does the job. So as you can see, the interior sample spacing as well as border sample spacing is set to 100 units. That means they're going to appear 100 units away from each other. So that's roughly about 100 centimeters, 100, which is a meter of 3 feet in the imperial scale. So if you go and set this to something like 50, it will basically get closer. So on both of them, as you can see now, grass, it looks much more natural. So that looks very cool, right? Let's try and make it a little bigger. So because now you can select your forest actor blueprint, and you can actually select one of these points that comes from the spline component, and you can drag them out and make it bigger, just like that. So that looks very awesome. Perfect. I think for now we can pause it and leave it as we are with what we've just done for the grass to spawn the grass on the landscape. In the next lesson, what we're gonna actually do is to use the same principle we've just done for grass and replicate it, but this time with the trees and also rocks later on. And I'll show you how to do this. And thank you so much for this time. And I'm looking forward to show you more in the next lesson.